You have a few minutes?
9:05.
You have a few minutes beyond 9:05.
yes.
Okay. All right.
John's very stoic tonight.
Pardon?
John is very stoic tonight.
Do you have a contribution, John, that is sort of bubbling
I'm trying to
around in
complete a
your-
lamentation.
a
Oh, okay.
lamentation?
Yes.
Okay. On
Is that a form of
something,
stoicism?
on something not involving the group, or we involving?
Yes, not involving.
Okay. Okay, we wish you well with that, honestly. We all have lamentations from time to time. Pardon? Yeah, yeah.
Cycle.
I
Pardon?
keep mine Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. After that, I don't lamentate.
Schedule your lament.
You don't lament?
No.
Okay, so what we were talking about was that at some point here around Valentine's Day, I'm going to have my ankle replaced. That'll be fun. And so I'm going to be a little short on videos for a few days. And we'll see how it works out. Ideally, yes, we're planning you folks at the house with wine, with pizza or
I'm sure I can
something.
bring a bottle.
Well, actually, if I were to order pizza from here, could somebody come and pick it up and bring it over to the house?
Sure.
It's on the way, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
Who's on the way?
that way. Yeah, I mean, it's just a little farther out, Bay Ridge.
I'll volunteer to bring a bottle of wine.
Okay, terrific. Because I won't be doing much shopping for 6 weeks since it's my right ankle, so I'm not going to be driving. Okay, all right. So we're going to do this at home for a few days.
I'm starting when?
Starting the 26th of February. The 19th of February, I'm going to call a holiday, vacation day from group, because that's 5 days after the surgery. So I think by the 26th, I'm going to be getting around the house. I better be, or I'm going to have a serious bathroom problem. No, but I'm going to get a little scooter that I can kneel on, one of those kneel-on scooters, right? And so, yeah, I'm expecting everything will be cool. And I'm just going to be healing, and I might be on some ibuprofen or something, but otherwise good. I'm really looking forward to it because my ankle is just... But meanwhile,
Be a $1 million man here soon.
I know, because the knee turned out really well. I mean, I feel like my knee is my strongest joint in my legs right now.
Probably is.
Yeah, the replaced knee, so I'm highly recommending it. Okay, so we're talking about Aion, and so I want to go through the various notes because Aion is a complicated book. It, as we learned from Jung's Redbook for Our Time, Aion is really Dr. Jung's commentary about the Redbook. Which nobody bothered to tell anybody until decades later. And this is the diagram that sort of explains the first 4 chapters of Aion. You've probably seen this diagram before. But if we look at this diagram, here's the ego here for men and women, and that's chapter 1 of Aion. The shadow is chapter 2. The anima and animus is the syzygy, which is chapter 3 of Aion. And then the self is chapter 4 of Aion, and that's this. And so one interesting thing, I recently got within the last week, I got Marie-Louise von Franz's book called The Interpretation of Fairy Tales. And it's very interesting because in the introduction, she says, and I read a little bit of it today, which I'll put up on the channel within the next couple of days, but what she says is that every fairy tale is about one archetype, and that is the self. Okay, there is only one archetype. I mean, basically what she says is there is only one underlying archetype at depth level, the deepest level, and that is the self. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it God image or transpersonal self or greater personality or what have you. It's all the same thing, and all fairy tales are about that. And she mentioned a personal criticism of all books written by Jungian analysts about fairy tales, because she says the problem is, though the people that have written those books have what'd they do? They treated the fairy tale as an analysis of the writer. Okay, so they treated the fairy tale as a psychoanalysis of the writer of the fairy tale. Okay, rather than treating it as an explication of the self. You with me? So they're trying to get at, what are this guy's issues, type stuff. And she says, that's not what it's about at all.
Hans Christian Andersen, you mean? Like the original
Yeah,
lives?
right. Or the Grimm brothers, obviously. Yeah. But, Hans Christian Andersen, we're going to analyze him based on the stories he told. And she says that a fairy tale isn't about an analysis of the writer. It's about an explication of the self. And it's like you have to get at the self in hundreds or thousands of different ways to have an adequate metaphor of what it is. There's no one straightforward description of this archetype. But if you read fairy tales, you can start to get a sense of it, okay, as a metaphor. And if you think of it in that way, then you can learn something from it. But it shouldn't be trying to analyze the writer. Comments, Bill? No?
Well, there is no single writer, is what she pointed out too, is that the fairy tale starts as a local saga and then mutates when it moves to an adjoining town or community, and then it morphs into more of a universal fairy tale concept.
Right, yeah.
And
So
so it's very collective.
yeah.
Yeah.
So her point was that it's an explication of the collective unconscious. It's not one individual. You're quite right about that.
Didn't Jung write a book? One of his books is about tracing the morphing of myths and fairy tales and stuff, so that you could pick up what how the psyche has evolved and changed over time.
Certainly Psychology and Alchemy
Yeah.
is something like that, yes.
Well, I mean, that sounds sort of like what we're talking about.
Well, von Franz talks about actual authors who made that their career to study those, the way that they evolved and changed. And that's how she came to the conclusion of, or made the statement that they started as very local like in some cases, true stories
Right.
that were embellished or whatever,
Right.
and then kept morphing as they went to adjoining communities.
They were embellished, and then some things fell away, and that sort of thing.
And
knew
handed
that,
down.
She knew that because of these scholars, and she names the scholars in some of the books, and they're mainly, I think, German scholars.
Yeah.
So in her book, she actually names those people.
Okay. So, anyway, I have to admit that over the last 30 years, I've been ambivalent about looking at fairy tales as part of this. And yes, I knew that Marie-Louise van Franz had written about fairy tales, but now I'm newly interested in it because I think she's got something there. And that's only by reading the introduction to her book. I got the book, I bought the book, but I haven't read more than the introduction. But it's very interesting point that she makes.
Good book.
Yeah. Okay.
2 years, but I have to.
Okay, so Edinger is talking about the author's note and the preface in the Aion lectures. And I started with this because if I find that if you take Jung full strength, it might be overwhelming. So I wanted to feed people into this. And so in the author's note, we talked about this before. Edinger talks about this creating a whole new department of human knowledge. Well, I don't know if it does, because the problem is in the academy, in universities, everybody has their own thing. This guy's a Kantian scholar, and this guy's a Schiller guy or whatever, and they don't allow bleed over between the opinions, and you know, a lot of Jung's early work obviously was with Freud, for example, and he was quite respectful of Freud, and yet, you know, there's this, oh, it's oil and water and never the twain shall meet. And so, you know, Deb, you know, years ago I had written to a bunch of universities and said, hey, I can teach finance, and do you have any adjunct jobs? And I always got adjunct jobs that way, okay? And so for years, 7 years total, I taught adjunct finance and business law and international finance and those sorts of things. Okay, so Deb says to me, well, why don't you write to all the universities in the area and offer to teach Jung? So I did that. I wrote to 19 local universities, and no one would talk to me. Nothing. Crickets.
Liberal arts.
I don't know.
I can hear them talking about that. Isn't he that atheist? Who's this guy? You know, or
You know, who is this guy who thinks he can teach Jung, right?
no, who is Jung?
Yeah, who is Jung, right?
'Cause
Okay.
he's not in mainstream.
So that's why I've been
psychology.
running a graduate course in Jungian psychology for the last year and a half, and a graduate seminar in it. You know, not for purposes of becoming a psychotherapist, because that would be a big mistake. I haven't heard the repercussions of this, but I've started to criticize Jungian analysts because I think that they have basically suppressed the fundamental tenet of Jungian psychology, because once they became analysts, they wanted to protect their profession. And I don't know, do you have any?
Themselves right out of existence, yeah.
Pardon?
They're protecting themselves right out of existence.
Yeah, it's like that because they're afraid of the academy and they're afraid of theologians, religious guys, And, you know, that's one of the fundamental things that Jung was about. And
Well, you know, it's a different kind. It's a different animal. I mean, whereas in academia, you've got, it's very rational. I've heard you say the word rationalistic. It's very thinking. It's very much that. And when you get to Jung, you're no, just reading textbooks and researching other people's text isn't going to cut it. You've got to experience something, and it's almost it's not academia anymore. It's something more than that. Academia is part of it, but it's maybe it's more like being in a seminary. You've got to have sort of a religious exposure, and
I don't know. Bill, do you think that seminarians today have a religious experience?
I don't know. I'm just using the term in a very vague way as I understand it. No.
No, yeah. I mean, that's,
But you know, I think that's the case with all the universities and all the learning now. It's
just memorize a lot of
in order
facts.
to get your credentials, you just have to be able to either regurgitate or amass, you know, put together other people's ideas. But you're always dealing with ideas. You're not dealing with your own personal sacrifice and experience of something greater than what you're talking
So
about.
it's like once removed, you're saying?
It's
well-
not a lived experience education anymore. It's a mental thing.
It's
Right.
preparation for a profession. So in
Well-
the clergy, you've got to get practical skills in, and so a lot of it is focused on practical skills. That would include practical theological skills in doing pastoral work and that sort of thing.
So it's job readiness, just like all the
Yeah,
professions.
yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a shame in a
Yeah.
way.
Well, that's
because
the
it
way
lacks
art
that depth.
became. Art became design because you had to be able to fit yourself in, plug yourself into an industry, and artists don't plug into anything.
Well, and I, you know, Bill, you really helped me with this because we know from the psychological types issue, the MBTI, that there's thinking and feeling types. And all of this stuff, the academy, all this stuff about credentialing and everything, that's all on the rational side. That's all on the thinking side. Nobody even mentions the feeling side. And yet, okay, if I think back on it in terms of my religious experiences, those are all on the feeling side, definitely. And you cannot even describe them. And I'm sure the artist in the room here would agree. You can't even describe them in a way that adequately addresses it. I mean, other than showing the experience on video, which we have done a couple of times, but in terms of, and Jung talks about this. I mean, it's in paragraph 63 of Aion, and I mean,
Pretty good.
he had,
He had that gun ready.
no, okay, I'm going to cut to the chase here. Chapter 4, the self. Okay. It says, this is right after the same paragraph. Okay, but right after the duck-billed platypus.
Hold it together.
No, but the point about the duck-billed platypus, since we're raising it, is that, and it's a very good way to describe it, because, okay, I can sit and I can write textbook after textbook about the life of the duck-billed platypus, okay, but that in no way expresses the experience of being a duck-billed platypus. Okay, it doesn't. And that's the point. Okay, that, okay, a zoologist can be the best writer in the world, the most rational zoological writer in the world, but he can never describe what it's like to be a duck-billed platypus. He can describe a duck-billed platypus, and I don't know, maybe if he described it well enough, Bill could paint it. But it reminds me of Kieran Beer, actually. Have you ever heard of Kieran Beer?
It's Japanese.
Yeah. Okay. So Kieran Beer is a Japanese beer. It's extremely popular. It's maybe the most popular beer brand in Japan. And on the label, it has a picture of this creature that looks like some sort of a dragon, basically. Okay. But and no doubt you don't know what the word kirin means in Japanese. Okay, so the word kirin in Japanese means giraffe. Okay, so it's giraffe beer. So 1,000 years ago, someone made a trip to Africa, and they saw a giraffe. And as they came back across the world from Africa, across China, through the Khyber Pass, et cetera, and got on a ship that went to, in a very leaky boat, went back to Japan, and they're describing to Japanese artists what a giraffe looks like, and this picture that's on the label of Kirin beer is what they painted. Okay, right? It's like the old telephone game. That's exactly what it is. Okay, so the picture that's on the label of Kirin beer is an artist's conception of a giraffe based on the descriptions that came back to Japan 1,000 years ago. Okay,
That's cool.
it's really cool.
Is that like the difference between empathy and sympathy? If you sympathize, you can empathize, you might have had a similar situation, but you can never actually experience, even if your experience
What it's like to be that person.
in that situation. Even
Yeah,
if the
sure.
situation is similar, so.
Yeah, I mean, you can never, if you lose your mother, you can't tell me what it's like to lose your mother. You can't tell me what it's like to lose your mother. I can't tell you what it was like to lose my father and my mother, because, it's based on my whole life with them. And so I couldn't possibly express that adequately.
That's why we can't express the definition of a
Pardon?
duck-billed platypus
Well-
adequately without being.
Well, when he
Without
said,
being one, yeah.
when he said I could, as the artist, somebody describe it, I could paint it. But the first thing I thought of was he was speaking visually, and I wouldn't necessarily paint it visually. I wouldn't make it look photographic or anything like the.
Oh, so not a,
Right, okay, so you would probably come up with the same label, I mean, in fairness.
Well, no, that guy was taking someone's visual description. I wouldn't take a visual description. I would say that doesn't mean anything to me.
you would have to do an experiential of a duck-billed platypus?
No, but how do you, okay, I come and say I saw this creature in Africa, and
Well, I'd
it
say-
looked like this, and what do you mean, you can't take my experience? How would you do it?
I wouldn't be interested.
Okay, so, no, but, okay, you wouldn't, but you're a professor of art, Bill, so come on, tell me how a professor of art.
I'm not a professor of design. You're looking for an illustrator or a designer.
Okay, and you're saying this was an artist that did the Kirin label?
No. I'm just saying, you said that when you were talking to her earlier and you said you could give a description, Bill as the artist could probably paint it or something. I was thinking, well, what you were talking about was a visual description, and I wouldn't be interested.
He's a difficult artist.
You're just being difficult.
Yeah, that's it. It's like my daughter says,
Okay,
fine.
so paragraph 63. So right after the duck-billed platypus, okay, so let me get back to the duck-billed platypus here. Okay, so right after the duck-billed platypus, where is that? Okay, it says, it is not the concept that matters. The concept is only a word, a counter, and it has meaning and use only because it stands for a certain sum of experience. Unfortunately, I cannot pass on this experience to my public. I have tried in a number of publications with the help of case material to present the nature of these experiences and also the method of obtaining them. Wherever my methods were really applied, the facts I give have been confirmed. One could see the moons of Jupiter even in Galileo's day if one took the trouble to use his telescope. Okay, so what he's saying is if they used my experience or my methods, people would have the experience. So what he's saying is, in the context of what the objective of Jungian analysis is, the objective of Jungian analysis is to have you have an experience, this experience with a greater personality.
There's a practical resistance to this on the part of people who are caught up in the rational side.
Yeah.
And it's almost like just a total lack of interest, or that there's anything important about the methods. Now, someone who's seeking analysis, that might not be the case, but the average everyday person.
Yeah, but people go to church, people do go to church, and they go to church for something. Okay, are they going to church for a religious experience? Are they going to church for a rational experience? A rational experience being the experience of, okay, being in a community of people that will care about you when the good things in your life happen, like marriages, but they'll be also care about you when there are funerals. Okay, I mean, in the case of both of my parents, when we had their funerals, they filled the church. Okay, and so yes, a church does provide that kind of community, but I only had one religious experience in a church. Okay, I did have one. Okay, I acknowledge that I had one. Okay, and I'll describe it, which is when we baptized my grandson, and the part of the ritual in which we presented the new baby to the congregation. He was in my arms, and I was assigned to go around. It was my part in the ritual to hold the baby and take him around so that the congregation could experience him and accept him into the community of the church, basically. That's what the baptism is about, I guess. And when I did that, I had the experience of like a special light coming onto the faces of each of the people that I was looking at in the congregation. As I was showing the baby around, I had the experience of seeing a light in their faces that was not a natural light. I mean, it was something that was being projected out of my psyche, no doubt. But yeah, like an aura. And that was a religious experience. I mean, it was an experience like God coming into the room and blessing the baby. I mean, I can get very emotional about it right now. Okay. I did have another religious experience, two others at the Naval Academy Chapel, but they were during, not during services. In one case, I was feeling very low one day, and I went into the chapel, and I was sitting over on the side of the chapel, and they have this Tiffany window there, and the sun shone through the window. And lit me up, but nothing else. Okay, and I was so taken with it, I realized that it was so unusual that suddenly this light was coming through the stained glass window and it was shining only on me. I literally took a picture of it. I have a photograph of it. I mean, I took a selfie.
In
And
church.
nobody else was there. But I mean, I did. I took a selfie of it.
Capture that.
And I mean, I knew, I said, wow, this is awesome that this is happening. And it's just at this moment that I'm here and this is happening to me. And so I just picked up my cell phone and took the selfie, right? And then the other time was one of the things I've been doing is to respect the constitutional rights that my brothers in the Marine Corps who died were fighting for, okay? And I was having a difficult time with that, as you know, and I was again in the same place in the chapel over on the side, and I put my head down, and I just had the vision of these 5 men coming up and putting their hand on my head, one at a time, each one of them. And that was a vision. And so, yes, okay, I did have 3 religious experiences in church.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure, please.